Good morning. Oh, good afternoon. I fucked that up. Can you erase that?
Later.
Oh, okay. Okay, go ahead. Okay. Hello, everybody. Um, Hope you're having a good night so far. For our very first podcast guest, we are so excited to have this person on. I met him in 2018 when we was doing Pagan Pride in Colorado. And he's just a super duper person. I love his work. Everything he touches is gold. I'm going to have my co host, my cousin Nico, who is a big fan of his as well. And I would like Nico to introduce him.
We have a really awesome man joining us. Um, so we have Kaedrich Olsen, who is a Norse pagan author, uh, practitioner, Runegalder practitioner, and I have to tell you guys that this man is such a huge blessing in the pagan community, and he is, everything this man touches is gold. And he does everything right that we need in the pagan community. He is like supporting of all of our diversity and is just an absolutely wonderful person from everything that I've seen. So without further ado, we have Mr. Kaedrich Olsen here.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Hey, welcome. And thank you for joining us. It's going to be a great night.
Indeed.
Okay, so we're just going to get the interview here set up, get it on the road. So, the first question I have for you, Kadrick, is what inspired you to write your book and various articles, and what do you hope your readers take away from them?
The inspiration for the book came from an understanding of the runes that is a little bit different than maybe a lot of people have in the 21st century. Is we tend to see when we go to New Age bookstores, metaphysical places, we tend to see the runes as these cute little letter-like things written on little chips of wood or stone used for divination. And I've been studying the Norse path since I was a teen. Literally, I got into runes probably 13, 14 years old and started studying the Norse path at that early of an age. And the thing that came to mind as I've been working with the runes is that the runes are not these little letters that are carved in stone and wood. We think they are, but those are staves. Runes are these limitless energy potentials that exist between the subtle layers of our consciousness and the subtle layers of the universe. They came into existence in a time before time. Odin discovered them on Yggdrasil and gave them out to the different types of beings like the giants and the elves, the dwarves, the humans. And in a poem called the Sigurdrifumal, it's mentioned that runes are all over the place, on a glass, on a bare paw, on your nail, on all of these different things. And that inspired me to see that the runes existed everywhere, that they weren't these staves carved on stone or wood, that the runes exist everywhere. Like if you were to look at a table, you would see its fehu, its value, not only the monetary value of what you paid for it, but the value of it serving you as a table, its function. It has urus, its strength, meaning its ability to be stable and support what you put on it. And so the runes were found in everything. But that means the runes are inside us as well. That we have our own fehu, we have our own value, we have our own urus, we have our own strength, we have our own thurzas, our own capacity for hostility and violence and conflict. And when I started to realize that the inner rune world is a reflection of the outer rune world, that they are the one and the same, that you could use runes in the traditional way, which is singing the runes. It's called Guldur. When you sing the runes, today we would have affirmations and chanting. that you could use that runes to shift your inner world, the way you perceive yourself, the way you perceive the world around you. And then that causes an external change in the world around you as well. And that creates this nice little feedback process that as you change internally, you see a change externally, and it comes in and out. I almost called the book The Inner and Outer Futhark, but Woodrill Weiser didn't think that was too catchy of a name, so they went with Runes for Transformation. And so the impetus of the book is recognizing that there are runes within you in your own inner world, and that there are runes in the outer world everywhere, that they are connected because they're one and the same. And how you tune your consciousness and how your awareness and how you approach those runes becomes reflected in the world around you. And the readers, when they're reading the book, the thing that they're going to take away from it is I give you a chance to understand the runes from the Old Norse perspective, and then to notice how the runes exist in the world today, like Fehu is money, Fehu is an investment of time, effort, and energy. And then I give you an exploration for what the runes mean to you, especially in your unique situation. And then I give you techniques in order to use those runes as magical formula to create change in your inner world and your outer world. So it is definitely a different approach to runes. You're not learning divination. You're not learning tarot spreads with runes. You're learning how to use them as a transformative tool to change your world from the inside out.
Cool. Now, can you share your writing process and how you balance research with your personal experience?
Oh, the writing process was simple. I would put together an outline, pretty detailed outline. Usually it was inspired because a little wacky woo-woo weird thing about me is not only do I do the research, I do the deep dive into Old Norse culture, Old Norse literature. I can read badly, but I can read Old Norse. So I've done my own translations of the Poetic Edda and some of the Prose Edda. So I'm able to dive into the research on my own, but also I have a connection with beings I call the Whisperers. They are, in Norse terms, Disir, Alfar. They are higher level ascended beings. And other terms, they're spirit guides, ascended beings, ascended masters, that they've been in communication with me since I was a kid. And that has really informed a lot of the information I brought to the world. So this book is a pairing of a deep dive into the literature. It is really a good hardcore study into it, but put in a way that is practical for us in the real world. I mean, it's great to know the Old Norse mindset. It's great to know the Old Norse culture, but the runes and their approach to the gods and the spirits and the land spirits, that was an everyday part of their life. It wasn't just something that they saved for ritual on a new moon or whatever. It was something that they woke up, that they lived, they breathed. It was a part of their everyday life. And so my approach to this and what we're doing the writing is it's got to be something practical. You got to read it, you can understand it, but we need it in a 21st century context. We need it in the 21st century mindset so that we could use that information today in a way that makes sense to us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. I'm trying to write a book too from my experience with the community and coven work and stuff. I got so many experience. I get lost. So, how does your book contribute to the modern understanding and the practice of Norse paganism?
Well, it's only just one brief look at it because runes make up just one part of a more complex cosmology, for want of a better thinking, a more complex system. But it is, like I was saying, you will understand the runes from the Old Norse mindset and then how they present themselves in the modern world, in the modern context, like the rune Fehu is money and value and investment, not only of just financially, not only just circulation, money type thing, but also of effort, energy, the time you put into things. And it really, it's really important to me that we take some of these Old Norse concepts in their original context. How did the Old Norse people use it? And then how do we bring it to our world today? I mean, even if we were to look at the Norse god Odin, who discovered the runes, the winner of the runes. He brought runes to humanity, and runes were taught to humanity through the god Heimdall, disguised as a traveler by the name of Rig. But we can look at Odin as like the magician archetype. He's both a king and a magician. But if we look at Odin as the magician archetype, we could see him as a being that has access to hidden information, that can perform feats of manifestation, that we have access to this deeper wisdom. And so we can access Odin as that magician archetype, and we can even embody that archetype in ourselves, recognize the attributes, the traits, and qualities we have that are in alignment to Odin, and start to live that way. You see, like one of the things, and this is really coming to mind, working with the heathen community, and I've encountered a lot of people over the years that will tell me, Thor is my patron. I'm like, great. How do you honor Thor? And they're like, oh, we go to Bloat, which is the name of a ritual.
Mhm.
And I raise a horn to Thor and I yell, Hail Thor the loudest. And I'm like, cool. But what else do you do? They're like, oh, when we have feast, I bring a plate of offering to Thor. And I'm like, great. What else do you do? Nothing. There's dead silence. And so what I offer them is that ability to go back and look at the attributes of Thor. Thor is not a god of war, despite modern mainstream thinking. He's not a god of war. He's a protector. He's a guardian. He blesses and protects the home. He blesses and protects birth, marriages, funeral. He's there as a protector, a guardian. He looks over and he watches over and he protects us from these harmful forces. And so when we are offering our offerings to Thor, sacrifice. By the way, sacrifice means to make sacred. The root is sacra, sacred. And so when we are sacrificing to Thor, it isn't just a plate of food. It isn't just a horn of mead. It is the sacrifice of action, our noble deeds. For example, when it's bedtime and you're shutting off lights in the house, everyone's going to sleep. You walk around, make sure the doors are locked, the windows are closed. If you have an alarm system, the alarm system is set. If you have external lighting, the lights are on so that the home is protected and safe. That you are doing the things necessary. If there's a fire, how do we get out of here? If somebody breaks in, what do we do to protect ourselves? What are the routines? What are the practices? By going through those routines, by going through those scenarios and finding a way to protect your home and protect your family, that is a sacred action dedicated to Thor. That is the living embodiment of Thor's gifts that you can bring to the world. And so when we look to the Norse tradition, there are very practical, real world things that we can take away from, like Odin, about learning, teaching, guiding, being a leader, with Thor, protecting and keeping your home safe. We can look to all of these gods for that inspiration. And runes are just one little aspect of it, but there's a greater field of things that we can draw from to bring into our lives.
And I absolutely agree with that. I'm also a Norse pagan, and that is 100% true. I see that as well too, which was weird for me, that in part of the heathen community, people don't. Well, they honor the gods and always have the gods' names from their lips. They don't live by the gods a lot, where they aren't actively going out and putting in the work to embody the god that they want to worship.
Very true.
But my question for you is, what drew you to Rungaldr, and how has it impacted your spiritual journey?
When I was a teenager, my parents' basement that I grew up in, the basement of my home, was a veritable library of wall-to-wall shelves and multiple rows of books. Books on anything that you want, anything you could read. And my parents were very open-minded. We went to a spiritualist church, which was like your normal Protestant church, but it had transmediumship at the end. There were seances in the church basement. So I grew up knowing how to communicate with spirits. I grew up in a haunted house. And so there were books on magic and mysticism. And one of my favorite books that I remember reading is Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. It's a huge tome-sized book. It's chock full of the teachings of mystery schools everywhere from ancient Egypt to Rosicrucians and Masons. And there's a little section in there on the Brotherhood of Odin, which caught my interest, it caught my attention. But at the same time, I was exploring all sorts of different things in mysticism. My parents had no problem with me exploring. My mom worked near Isis bookstore here in Denver and would stop and get me herbs to make my own incense, get me any books, anything I was curious about. She was open and let me explore. And about that same time, I was reading Ralph Blum's Book of Runes, which a lot of people start with. It's okay to start with, but don't stay there. But I was reading that book. At the same time, I was reading a book called The Way of Weird by Brian Bates, which is about a Christian scribe going into pagan England to learn about the pagan ways. And I was listening to some crazy precursor death metal music out of England by a band called Sabbath, which had an album based off of Brian Bates' work. And all of those pieces just converged. Because while I'm reading this book, I'm realizing that all of these ancient mystery schools are saying the same thing. They're just using their own terms, their own symbols, their own iconography to describe the same concepts. And I realized in order for me to better understand that, I needed a control group. I needed a foundation of my own. And since runes were working for me and all of these pieces were falling into place, I chose the Norse path. It was like it was calling to me anyway. And the big part of that was runes. And as I took that deep dive into runes, reading the Eddas, reading the sagas, reading the original literature. Here's the thing about Old Norse culture that some people don't realize, and it's a peeve of mine, because most people are used to seeing Vikings on TV, which are these brutal, mindless warriors that have half-shaven heads, even though they live in the far north. The TV show Vikings doesn't make sense. Last Kingdom is great, though.
Yes.
But they kept nice, solid records. The Danes kept good stories through Saxo Grammaticus. The Icelanders wrote down a ton of stuff. There's ample amounts of literature. And so I took a deep dive into that, studying the lore. And that's when I noticed in a lot of places, the Norse literature talking about Guldur, about Gal and Gel, words meaning to sing, and that they were talking about singing the runes. There's nothing in Norse literature about divination. There's no archaeological evidence of divination for runes, nothing. But there's ample examples in literature and archaeology of runes being used for magic. And there are plenty of places that talk about runes being sung or chanted to bring them to life. And as you can hear, I'm going to brag a little bit. I've got a good voice. My voice is great. And I hear compliments about it all the time. And it just made sense for me with my voice and with the runes being sung to dive into using the sonic capacity of runes, because that is the traditional way of working with runes. And I don't know, that was my inspiration. I know it's a long story, but there are a lot of elements that go into it to why we get to singing the runes and why runes are an important tool when sung.
And fantastic. And if anybody was wondering, the modern use of runes and divination started about 1960s to 1970s here in the US.
Yes.
While I love using runes for divination, it is not a historically accurate practice.
Correct.
My next question, could you walk us through a typical Guldur session or ritual? What does that look like?
It's the way I do it is ecstatic working. And the reason being is the name Odin. It comes from the Old Norse of Odin, which comes from Proto-Norse Wodenaz. But Odin means the master, the ruler, the king, not really king, but master, the ruler of ecstasy, of inspiration, of madness. The word Other means madness or ecstasy. But the way I look at the Other is it's like a subtle body. And if we were looking to the Eastern traditions where we have like the mental body, the emotional body, the magnetic body, which draws energy into you, the electric body is the expression of energy. and that's the Other, is that expression of energy. So Odin is the one to call upon for doing rune work like this. So typically, I will start a bloat, a ritual, where we call in Odin, where we raise a horn, we bring him in, we say, "Hail Odin, what we're doing here, what we're doing, and what the process is." I will have already carved out runes or painted them out prior to the session. Part of the work for Galdering happens outside of the session. You choose the runes, you know what runes you're going to use, you carve the amulet, you carve the time, whatever it is that you're putting the runes on. You get that all set up before ritual. But we're calling in Odin. We're getting into a mindset, generally just like a little bit of a meditation. We got some incense, candles going. And then because we already know what runes we're using, we already know the seed sounds, we already know the Galder sounds, either the name of the runes or just the seed sounds. Like instead of Fehu, we might just do Fe. Instead of Urus, we might just do Oo. So we just get like the seed sound going. And while you think, feel, and experience, meaning you think about what those runes are used for, what your intention is, what the outcome is that you're looking for, you feel it. You have that emotional connection with what it feels like to have that moment of achievement. And then you experience it. You visualize it as if it's happening right now, as if it's the energy created, as if there is nothing else but time now. And that has happened right now. And so you think, feel, experience what those runes are all about, and then you just start slow chanting it. You could have some drums, you could have some music. I've got a couple of folk instruments here. Of course, I've got drums, but I've got a Kravik lira on the wall here, which is 7 strings on it, and then I've got a toggle harp over there, which is a little more difficult to play. It's a bowed instrument. I've got some folk instruments, but you start off slow, just kind of like fail, fail, and then you just work it up until you just get to like this fail, 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 fail. You know, you just get mad. You just go crazy, and you make sure that there's nothing you could fall or trip over. You make sure that you're not bumping into people, and then you sing an alu to end it. A great example of this sort of is out of literature in the Hauvelmal, the sayings of the High One. It's about Odin discovering the runes and how they're used. He gives a section of 18 rune charms.
Yep.
And in one of them, he talks about carving this rune under a shield and then chanting under the shield, Hele Hilde Till, Hele Hilde From, which means whole healthy going to the battle, whole healthy coming back from the battle. And so you can imagine carving like the rune, especially the tear rune is what it usually was from archaeology, the tear rune under a shield, holding it over your head and having a group of people going, Hele Hilde Till, Hele Hilde From, Hele Hilde Till, Hele Hilde From. So you just build up this ecstatic fury with everybody resounding that. And then you finish with like this yelling, screaming, alu, whatever it is, rounds of mead and the horn drinking. You just get worked up into this ecstatic frenzy, and then you release that energy. So it's very much similar to the sigil working as described by Osman Spare in a lot of ways.
Wow. I'm energized now.
Oh yeah.
I am. I'm just loving this.
You actually answered the next question that I had on that, which was, how do you interpret and work with the runes? Right there. So let's do you have any rune tips that you can tell us as far as like the modern divination practice, making bind runes, or through Golder?
Tips, you're saying?
Yep.
Study, study, study. Make your mistakes, learn from them, and keep growing. There's no right way to do any of this. An example of what I mean, there's no real right way of this, is runes were primarily the written languages, the written form of the Proto Norse and the Old Germanic languages. They're literally a written language. It's where we get words like day comes from the Dagas rune, year comes from the Yera rune, birch comes from the Berkana rune, fee comes from the Fehu rune. Letters like F, S, T, B, R, They come directly from the runes. They're the same shape. They're the same phonetic value. So we get a lot of our English language from the runic origin. And so my primary thing is look at the languages. Look at the history of the language. That will give you some deeper insight to it. Now, part of that language learning, a part of the runes, is understanding that you can actually get a PhD in runology. It's not just something left to the metaphysics field. This is a legit accredited field of study because there are thousands of runestones all over Scandinavia, and they even reach down into like Belarus and Ukraine and into Russia. There are runestones all over the place because the Old Norse people, not the Vikings, that's a different, but the Old Norse people were the original culture, not the original cultures, but they really did set some of the original cities, the original big established cities and settlements in Ukraine, in Belarus, maybe even Azerbaijan. There's some evidence of that showing up. So the Norse reached really far, and they left their runes behind. You can go to the Hagia Sophia in Turkey, and there are runes carved all over. It's graffiti, mind you, but there are runes in Turkey because the Norse were there. So the tips that I have on that is study it as a language. Look at it as a language primarily. And what I mean by you can't go wrong is part of the thing that really gives runologists a headache is there was no standardized spelling.
Yeah.
Jackson Crawford said something that I really love about the difference between the Elder Futhark and the Younger Futhork. Is the Elder Futhark is used for the Proto-Norse languages prior to the Viking era. So the Vikings between 793 and 1066, that 200-year period, would have been speaking Old Norse, and they would have been using Younger Futhork. Well, the Elder Futhark has 24 runes in it, 24 staves. The Younger has 16, and 4 of them are the letter A. So it makes it difficult in sometimes translating rune stones because you're trying to figure out what these people were saying. And sometimes they would use just a single rune for an entire word, which threw it off. And sometimes the runes are not just a phonetic value, but runes also have their ideograms. They're also an idea for each rune. So sometimes in the rune carvings, they would just put a single rune for an entire word or an entire concept, making it difficult. So with that said, don't beat yourself up on being specific and accurate. You know what the rune means. You know what that runic energy is. You know what your intention is. Just do it. Just go for it. Make it work. You still need to know what that rune is. You can still really mess things up. A little soapbox here. One of my biggest problems with Ralph Blum is he made all of the runes nice and happy and friendly. Like the rune Thurazaz in his book is a gateway, an opening to another place or whatever. No, it represents giants. It represents hatred and violence and aggression, hostility. And sure, it's a gateway if you're putting a stick of dynamite in the wall. Yeah. That works. So you still need to know what the runes are about. You still have to study. You just can't grab a rune and say, well, it means this, and I'm going to let it be that. No, you still have to know what you're doing. But don't be too specific. Don't be too harsh with it because the Old Norse people weren't either. So have fun with it and explore it. But be sure you're doing your homework.
And one of the things I love about the Old Norse writings is that most of the historical finds we have are them just labeling things. It's just, here's a deer antler, comb, Gerald's comb.
When we look at like the difference between archaeologists and mainstream attention is like, ooh, look at the silver. Ooh, look at the sword. Ooh, look at the axe. Archaeologists want the trash. They want the trash pits because the trash pits show how people were living every day, what people were using day to day, showed what they were eating, what they were wearing, what they were, not just designer stuff, not just jewelry, but what were the practical tools of the time that they broke and threw away. And when the average person who's watching like the Vikings TV show or they don't want to see a trash pit. But the archaeologists love the trash bit because that's the real story. And to me, that's the most interesting stuff is what were they really doing?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. So you mentioned that you do the Gulder singing, and you have music albums out about your Gulder singing. Um, can you tell us about that? Where can we find that?
Yeah, that's on Bandcamp. I think it's on Bandcamp. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but there are definitely some albums out there. This is a theory that I put together that I call Galdracraft, which is the power of Runesong. Galdr being Runesong, Kraft being power. The basic theory behind that is if we go back to the Elder Futhark of 24 staves, there are 7 vowel runes, sort of, we can call them vowel runes. And if I were to put those vowel runes along the length of the spine, with ooh being at the base because it's got that ooh sound to it, and Isa being at the top of the head because it's got that ee sound to it, that it gives us this awareness of where in the body we can resonate certain tones based on the vowels. Because Old Norse, like modern English, every word it has at least one vowel in it, if not multiple vowels. And knowing where these resonant centers are in the body gives us an ability to move that energy around inside of us. So if we're going to be doing a healing phrase like Laukaz Alu is an Old Norse healing phrase, you start at the throat with the ah sound, go to the base of the spine for the oo sound, and you just move that energy up and down. Laukaz Alu. Again, think, feel, experience healing, not the thing that you want rid of. This is the thing about healing, by the way. If you're trying to do healing work, you're trying to do prosperity work, you're trying to do love work, whatever it is, you aren't doing the healing work going, ooh, I want to stop being sick. I want to stop being sick. I want to stop being sick. You think, feel, experience what it's like to be healthy, to be whole, to be strong, to be vibrant and alive. That's when you do your Laukaz Alu. So that's step one, is paying attention to where the vowels are and then moving that energy up inside, up and down where that is. The other thing is, and this is purely modern, there's absolutely no history to any of this. This is all modern work. But there are 7 notes in the diatonic scale that we use for music. There are 7 vowel sounds. So now if I were to take the Laukaz Alu, and put that onto musical scale, it makes fifths,
Mm-hmm.
the dominant chord. It's a fifth. The ah to the ooh is a fifth. And I can now write music. I can take Old Norse poetry. I can take runic inscriptions, and I could write music based off of that because now I know what notes are, what vowels to move up and down. I know how to move that energy inside, and I just pair that with my own natural creative musical talents because I've been playing music my entire life. And that is the theory. That's the basis for all of this. And the first album I put together is a rune ritual. It walks you through setting space. It walks you through guldering the runes, all of them. And then it goes through rituals for peace, prosperity, healing. And then it goes to like an exit ritual, Eli Leaf Salu, which is about, it basically means soul magic for eternal life. And it's a way of just incorporating all of that energy and bringing it in. And then the other albums have guided meditations on them, like paranormal work, clearing negativity, connecting to higher self, things like that. But the music in the background is rune based, like I was talking about. It's what runes do I want to use here? What notes am I using? And then how do I create music off of that? So all of those albums that you'll find on my Bandcamp page are all rune based music, even though they're not overtly runes. They're still runes hidden within, which is appropriate. Runes, the word rune means mystery, the hidden, the unknowable stuff. So it's perfect that you don't know what runes are in there.
Let's see. What role do runes play in creating and transforming aspects of our lives?
That's a good question. If we were to read the Old Norse literature, especially poems like the Havamal, the Sigurdrifu Mal. If we were to read sagas like the saga of Eil Skallagrimsson, they are used in everything from promoting prosperity, improving fertility, not just to the fields, but the money coming in
Mm,
of having a family. They're used for protecting the family. They're used for helping with childbirth, for calming the storms. And any aspect of your life, that's probably the best way to do this. Any aspect of your life that feels blocked, that feels stuck, that could use some promotion, some energy charging it up, giving it that booster, it's there. And this is goes back to my criticism of Ralph Blum making all of the runes nice and happy. Is life isn't all nice and happy.
mhm,
Life has its challenges, its ups and downs. Part of what keeps it so interesting and fun is it's got these challenges, it's these ups and downs. You weren't coming here from your higher self just to have like this meek and boring life where everything just works out. And runes are a reflection of that. Like we talked about Thurzaz being the hostility and aggression. There's
mm,
Hagalaz about natural disruption, the chaos that comes from crap happening. Nauthiz for like the needs, the constraints. What is it that you need in your life? What are you lacking? Isa, when everything just kind of comes to a standstill, when it just gets locked up and
mhm,
frozen in place. Then there's also Yera, your success, the things that you've achieved. Wunyo, the joy, the happiness. Gebo, the giving. And then there's also the spiritual growth runes like Perthro about fate, causality. Algiz reaching up into the higher realms. There's some of these runes that are harder to understand. Awaz, the yew tree. What the hell is that all about? We don't have, you know, there's so the runes cover every aspect of your life. The discipline of tears, a rune. The seed fertility, the masculine fertility of Freyr is a rune. Inguz. The feminine fertility of the trees of the lands is there with the rune Berkana, his sister Freya. The teachings, the wisdom, the learning and growing, Anzus with Odin, it's all there. And even if you need a change, life needs a big disruption, a big change. Dagas, it's there. So the runes are a reflection of every aspect of your life. And I think this is why the runes are what they are, is the Old Norse mystics looked at the complexities of their world, the complexities of their life, and they were able to tune into these runic energies and give them names and descriptions for what was applicable as a value to their world. Like they valued hard work, they valued the prosperity, they valued strength. And so the runes are a reflection of the value of the Old Norse and the Proto Norse people's lives, which is interesting when you look at it as it shifts from the 24 to the 16, because during the year 536, we have the dust veil that hit the entire world, which was 18 months straight of basically near twilight conditions. Growing seasons were cut short, things were colder, there was famine, and Scandinavia got hit with a little ice age right about that time period. So all of the happy runes from the Elder Futhark, like the Yera and the Wunyo, well, the Wunyo and the Gebo and those kind of things are gone when you get to the 16 runes. It's because it was a reflection of a harder way of life. It was a reflection of just how things got more challenging during the Little Ice Age and after the Dust Veil hit. And so the runes are a reflection of every aspect of your life. And like I said, you could use them to tune in to boost the energy of the things that you want or to transmute the energy of what you don't want. I do a lot of shadow work with my clients, a lot of shadow work. I would say most of my clients right now are shadow work clients. And sometimes we will use runes to reflect, what is the shadow that you're experiencing, and then how do we transmute that using runes. For example, I'm sorry, I'm going long-winded here, but it's good stuff here. For example, the rune Nauthiz, it's like the letter N, and it means need. It's like a rune of constraint. It's what you don't have. It's what you're lacking. You could think of its opposite might be Wunyo, which is joy, success. It's the things that you do have. It's the gratitude for the things that you have. And if I were to run a scenario, is at the end of the month, bills are paid, Food's in the cupboards, food's in the refrigerator, things are taken care of, and you got $20 in the bank. Boom, that's the situation. Coming at it from a Nauthi's perspective, which is scarcity, which is lacking, you're going to go, holy crap, what am I going to do? I've only got $20. What if something bad happens? Oh no, I'm not prepared for anything. Cool. The universe hears that and goes, great. You like those lessons of scarcity? You like those Nauthi's lessons? Cool. I'll give you more of that. And those people are wondering why life is so hard, why life is so difficult. Well, because the universe thinks it. You love grumbling about not having crap. The universe thinks that you love having more expenses than income because that's what you're focusing on. You have a Nauthi's mindset.
Yes.
But you can take a Wunyo mindset. You can go, okay, I've got food in the fridge, bills are paid, all this is taken care of, and I got $20 left over after all that's done. You mean everything's taken care of? I got a place to live, got a roof over my head for the next month, I got a car, no bill collectors are coming after me, and I got $20 left? How cool is that? Look at what I've got, and I got more left. Then the universe is going to look at you and go, oh, you like these lessons of abundance, huh? Cool, here's more of that for you. Oh, you like these lessons of having prosperity flow in and the building of your capital. Cool, here's more of that for you. The situation is the same, but the runes that you're using will reflect how you are getting more of it. Remember, I said your inner world is a reflection of the outer world and vice versa. So if you're aware of that, you can be aware that you're in a scarcity, lack, Nauthi's mindset and intentionally shift it to a Wunyo mindset. Wear the Wunyo rune, like get an amulet of the Wunyo rune, wear it around your neck or a ring or something, or grab it out of your rune bag and carry that around with you. So it's a reminder of Wunyo. So when you have those moments of like, oh crap, oh yeah, look at what I do have. And you've got that gratitude. The next moment you're going through and you're like, crap, I can't do that. Oh yeah, but look what I do have. That Wunyo will constantly remind you to shift your mindset. And that becomes now a way of life. And wherever you put your energy, wherever you focus your emotional energy on more of, is what you're going to get reflected back at you. And those runes, like I said, think, feel, experience. Wherever you're putting that emotional energy, you're going to get more of a reflection back at you. So you don't have to do this big, elaborate gold or rune ritual. You can just carry a rune with you and carry it around your neck to remind you, oh, yeah, be grateful for what I have. Look at the things that I already have and the stuff that's going good for me. And you will get more of that. And so that's how the runes are a practical tool and how we could use them in literally every single area of your life, from health, well-being, your job, your spiritual growth. Everything is in the runes. Everything.
I absolutely love that.
I do too.
Ironically, I do keep Feihu in my wallet for that reason.
Perfect.
Let's take a couple. I saw some good questions pop up in our comments here. Let's see, we have Laura McPherson and the Norns. When people are born, there's a Norn there, or do they know how many days a person will live? Is there a particular Norn there, or all three? So you're asking if when somebody's brought into the world, is that done by one Norn or all three? And then do they weave the fate or do they observe it?
This gives us a good opportunity to dive into something about Norse lore that we have to be careful of. Everything that we have written about the Old Norse, from the Eddas to the Sagas to Saxo Grammaticus to Venerable Bede to Adam of Bremen, every single thing written about the Norse was written by Christians. And they were cherry picked. Everything that they put down, even the Eddas that talk about the gods, were written by the Christians. Saemundr Magnusson was a Christian bishop who wrote the Elder Edda, the Poetic Edda. Snorri Sturluson wrote the Prose Edda. He is a Christian bishop. And the only way they could get away with writing this down is being careful what they wrote down. And so they had to modify things. They had to change things. And they put things down in terms that they best understood. And these were very learned men. They were educated. They weren't dumb. They were very educated. And they knew contemporary mythologies. They knew old Greek mythologies. They knew other sort of other sort of mythos. And when it came to the Norse, the Norns, when it came to the Norns, the Christians really didn't understand Norse fatalism. They knew the words, and so they put the words down, but they described them basically like the parse out of the Greek mythos: past, present, future, women weaving the fates, and that everyone has a determined timeline. Sure, that could have been part of what was there, but that's not quite what the Norns were. You see, the Norns are not past, present, future. Their names do not mean past, present, future. Their names are actually causal terms. They're terms of causality, meaning Urth, the Norn Urth, her name is a present participle of advertha, which means to be. So Urth means being, that which is being, the way things are. It's not necessarily present tense, it's just the way things are. Following her up, following Urth up, is the future participle verthandi. Again, we got that verth, to be. Verthandi, which means that which is becoming. Not necessarily the future, but that which is in transition to what that is being, what's becoming. And then we have skuld, also pronounced shuld. It's where we get the word should from, and it means debt. And that is kind of like this causal force pulling you. Like, what debt do you have to fill? What is this causal energy pulling you forward? Is that sort of the causal force that lets that which is into what is becoming? And so it becomes a cyclical thing. What is skuld becomes an urd, which becomes a verthandi, which becomes a skuld. So it's constantly cycling, it's constantly growing, but it's being led by, let's say, the gravity of something called urlag, primal law.
Yeah.
Or being like the rune or primality, log being being law. So it's primal law. You can sort of think of the urlog as being fate, but it's not really fate that you're locked into. It's not really destiny that you have to achieve. The way I like to look at it is gravity. Urlog is like the force pulling you down a steep hill. And Urskold Verthandi is you sitting in a go-kart. And the go-kart works perfectly great. The steering's awesome. The brakes are perfectly safe. But you get to choose your own Urskold Verthandi. You're still going down that hill. You're still following your Urlog. And if you want to sit in the middle of the street with your brakes firmly attached, go for it. Or if you want to go crazy going down the street at 1,000,000 miles an hour, bouncing off of parked cars or buildings, you can have a haphazard trip down that hill if you want. Or if you know the direction you're going and you're having fun with it and you love it, which you will, if you tap into your Orlog, you're going to love it because that's why you're here. Then you could just go straight forward down that hill and have a great time and make lots of fun with it. Or if you just want to cut the trip short and say, screw it, I'm out of here. I don't want to take this trip anymore. Your free will. And that's one of the big differences is fatalism versus causality. Fatalism is if you don't know, you're kind of locked into the path. You're stuck. That's the direction you're going. Causality means that you have a higher perspective of time. You have a higher perspective of events. You know that every single event isn't caused by a single factor. There are multiple factors that cause every event. And therefore, you know the little threads to pull, the little threads to weave. So you know how to poke here, to poke there, and the actions to take so that you're moving in the direction you want to move. The Old Norse has said multiple times that I only rely on my own might and main, mat okamegin, that I have my own might and main. I believe in myself more than I believe in anything, that the fate is in my own hands. That's stated in multiple places. So no one is locked in to the weavings of the Norns. That's an old Christian understanding of an old Greek concept. The Old Norse concept was you have the power, you have the free will to make your own choices, but your Orlog is still going to pull you in that direction.
Yep.
You have the choice to follow that direction or not. It's up to you. And that's really what the Norns are all about, is not three women, it's three causal forces guiding you on the path, on the course of your destiny, on the course of what your purpose is for existing.
Beautiful. And then the next one we have is here. Are there certain authors or books, materials, websites, etc., that you would recommend as an intro into the Norse pagan path, and ones that you would recommend to dive deeper?
That's a good question. Of course, there's my book, Runes for Transformation. It's great. But I will always recommend that you read the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. Yes, they're challenging, but if you really want to get into this, that's where you go. Then read the stuff by like Jackson Crawford,
Yes.
R.I. Page. She's great. R.I. Page, by the way, she's a runologist. She doesn't believe in the hokey wacky woo woo Norse religion. She's strictly a runologist, but her work is beautiful. The work of H.R. Ellis Davidson, her work is brilliant in studying the Old Norse lore. Now, the thing to keep in mind about like R.I. Page and Ellis Davidson, they're what we would call secondary authors. They go through contemporary literature of the Old Norse people because, like I said, the Old Norse were all over mainland Europe. They interacted with Arabic people, with people from the Middle East, from all over the place that wrote about them. So they were comparing the archaeology with contemporary literature as well as what the Norse wrote about themselves and putting them together in a very good comprehensive source. And bear with me one moment because I need to get you the book is called Children of Ash and Elm. I can't remember the author's name off the top of my head, but I highly recommend that book into a deep dive into the Old Norse culture and the Old Norse belief. Now, mind you, I'm not listing any of the books that you would find in the New Age bookstore or the metaphysical section of things. These are historical books because I think that's a much better approach. There are some good authors that are out there. And the thing that sucks with these modern times is either we're learning about the negative side of some of these authors coming to light, that they were always not really good people the entire time, or it's a product of modern culture that we find something about that author that we don't like, and now people are kind of going haywire with this one thing that they don't like. And that seems to be a lot of these metaphysical authors are falling into that category right now. So I'm not recommending any of their stuff, but I will recommend the people in the historical section because that's what I read. I don't read the metaphysical books. I read the historical books.
Let's see. Looks like we're back on track. So, Chrissy, I believe you are next, right?
Well, I think there's a couple of questions that you missed.
Oh.
Maybe 7 and 8 is what we have on the list. But I would love to go. Yes, of course. So what sparked your interest in the Norse paganism, and has your practice evolved over time?
Oh, it was that initial reading from Secret Teachings of All Ages and then getting into the runes. And then that really kind of, like, I needed to understand how our consciousness interacts with the world and with the universe. And the Old Norse became my foundation. Of course, over the years, I've explored other paths, I've explored other things, and I've been led in multiple directions. So the places I've gone has kind of been interesting. Like I said, I grew up speaking with spirits. I grew up in a haunted house. I grew up going to the spiritualist church. So to me, the paranormal has been a completely normal part of my world. It's completely, it kind of fathoms me when I hear people say that they don't have a paranormal experience. It's because they're used to what they're seeing in the movies of paranormal experiences, and they're not used to what the paranormal is really like. And some people have been taught, because we all have the ability when we're kids to communicate with spirits. We all have that ability as kids, but we've been taught over the years to turn it off, to tune out, to be afraid of it. And so it's been a big part of my path in the past many years of teaching people how to connect with and interact with the paranormal, because it is a natural part of our world. And guess what? That's the way it was in the Old Norse world. They knew they shared space with the spirits of the ancestors, with people who died. It's all throughout the literature. There are beings that are called like the Draugr or Droiger, which are kind of like almost like zombies or vampire type beings or poltergeists. They're really more like poltergeists. But then there's the Optagongers, which are like lost souls, people wandering the planet trying to figure out if they're dead or alive or what's going on. Then we have the Upvanninger, which are the ones who've been woken up. Those are the ones that we call in ritual and we call into seance. So the paranormal is a natural part of our world. The paranormal is normal. Supernatural is natural. The Old Norse knew that. And I've been incorporating more of paranormal teachings, everything from teaching people how to do seance, how to activate their paranormal abilities. I teach paranormal investigators how they can investigate haunted locations without getting attacked, without getting attachments. And sometimes I will use runes as part of that. Sometimes I will, and sometimes I won't overtly describe that they're runes, but they're still runes. So that is another part of the work that I'm doing. Another evolution of this work is shadow work. The reason why I got into shadow work is working with clients over the years. I've seen their spiritual development, I've seen their spiritual growth, but it's like always hits a wall. It always hits a place where they just can't move past it. Or when people are trying to upgrade in their life, they're trying to, to scale up their business, or they're getting married or having kids, shadows come out. Shadows come out in a big way, and it really delays and stalls out their spiritual growth. So I've added shadow work as a big part of what I do. And yeah, runes are an important part of shadow work, like we just talked about earlier with the Nauthi's to Wunyo practice. That's shadow work, being aware of the stuff, deeper, darker stuff, the things you're afraid of looking at, the things that you're ashamed of, the stuff that you were told that is bad about you. Well, we look at that and we bring that to light. Sometimes we use runes, most of the time not, but sometimes. I've got a 6-week shadow course where we do the runic pillar. We're looking at those vowel runes in there as a way of aligning. We do a ritual based off of the elements, earth, air, fire, water. And I do incorporate runes from the younger food bark as part of that ritual. So sometimes I will bring runes into shadow work. And then I'm going to go off the deep end with some people here because I had a hard time bringing in the paranormal because I know a lot of American Asatru, American heathens don't like the wacky woo-woo, witchcrafty, paranormal stuff. But it's a normal part of like European, Scandinavian culture.
Yeah.
It's really weird that it's not here. But follow me here. You can get weird.
We like weird.
Good. The Ynglinga Saga, written by Snorri Sturluson, and a couple of the other Old Norse sources, not by Sturluson, tell us that the Old Norse come from the Far East, that the Aesir, the gods, the old gods, come from the very Far East. That Odin, specifically Odin, traveled through many different lands, teaching many different people his wisdom, his teachings. And the people in those lands called him by the names that they best understood him as. And when he went to these different lands, he taught a group of followers. We say Dr or Dior, we call him that, his wisdom, his teachings. And if we look to these lands, we see that he's described the same way. This tall man with long hair, gray beard, piercing eyes. We see this with Thoth the Atlantean. We see this with Horus and the Shemsu Horus, the followers of Horus. We see this with Zoroaster. We might even see this with Viracocha in South America. It's like the same person. Well, when we travel back in time with languages, the word Aesir, the Old Norse gods, the Aesir, is cognate with Asuras out of India. Now, India has two sets of deities, the Devas, which are the good guy gods, and the Asuras, which are the bad guy gods that got kicked out and have to roam, which is what Odin is. Right? Odin's like this big rebellious god that rebelled against his own deities and created the world from it. Well, the Aesir and the Asuras are one and the same. So what the Hindu people tell us about the Asuras match what we're told about the gods. And it is also said that Odin created a city east of the Black Sea. This is in the Ynglinga Saga. This is solid Norse lore. That Odin created a city called Maringaborg east of the Black Sea. What's east of the Black Sea? Armenia and Azerbaijan. When we look at Azerbaijan, Aesir, Azer, it's a scratch in our head. Well, where did the Asuras come from? And we really dig into the Vedic lore, they are otherworldly beings. They have Vimanas. They're flying what we would call UFOs or spaceships or whatever, and they're having wars with missiles and fire and things that we barely understand in our terms today. But the Vimanas and the gods come from another world. And the gods are very descriptive of what we now know as like Andromedans and Arcturians and Pleiadians. And it's really kind of striking home that the Aesir, the Old Norse gods, really did walk this planet, that really are extraterrestrial beings that have been a part of our world since ancient times and are still a part of our world. And so I'm helping people tap into what I'm calling the celestial wisdom of Odin, taking the Old Norse wisdom, expanding it beyond the confines of the 3D realms on Earth, moving that into a higher sense. Because why? The Old Norse ancestors, the Old Norse people created a path for us that led up to here. And I am not a reconstructionist. I don't want to live the Old Norse lifestyle. I don't want to go back 1,000 years. I like the internet. I like technology. I like antibiotics. I like people being able to fix a broken femur, you know? And so imagine the Old Norse people, if they were to come to our time period, and once they get over the culture shock and they look at us here, they would look at the people trying to recreate Old Norse lifestyle and they want to live like it was 1,000 years ago. They would think you're crazy. You know, imagine the Old Norse people had a Dremel tool, how many runes would be all over the place? There wouldn't be any doubt. And so we are moving into an era where we are going to become interstellar. You know, I think Ray Kurzweil is right. We are looking at the technological singularity. In about 30 years, we are going to have no idea what technology is going to explode into with AI, with interstellar technologies. You know, with the Albuquerque drive is being tested and we're getting closer. And yes, I am one of those wackadoodle noodle people that firmly believe that extraterrestrials are on this planet today, working with the governments, that there are secret technologies. That I do believe that humanity is already an interstellar civilization at the secret levels. And I think we are about ready to go through disclosure, and humanity will no longer be secretly interstellar, that we will be mainstream interstellar. And we need to tap into this wisdom, this ancient celestial wisdom that has been embedded and encoded throughout all of human history. And we need to access it, make it alive today, and bring it forward into the new centuries, into the new time periods of humanity. So I do see that Old Norse wisdom is alive in the future generations. We just need to understand it for its celestial wisdom, what it was before it got adopted. You see, it was something that made sense to these interstellar beings before it was adapted to the cultures here on Earth that could understand it. And then it got passed around through word of mouth and changed and altered. But we can tap back into that original resource, go back to its celestial wisdom, and use that for the future generations of humanity. How is that for wacky doodle weirdo stuff?
Wow. You know, I'm so much into the paranormal and everything. I love it. Um, since we're on this subject, if you don't mind me asking, um, let's get onto the paranormal side of you, okay? Because it's so fascinating. At least for me, it is too. And I think it is for a lot of our viewers too. Um, do you think there's a little bit of supernatural in all of us? Do you think we all have that instincts of the supernaturous?
Absolutely. I think every single one of us was born with clairsentience, meaning we can feel energy around us. We're aware of energy around us. I believe every single one of us has some degree of clairvoyance, which is the ability to see with our mind's eye, not necessarily like hear, but hear. Aware of visual information. We have clairaudience where we can hear. We have claircognizance to know. And there's a whole much more to that. I firmly believe all of us were born into a world with these abilities. This is, excuse me, that's why kids have imaginary friends. That's why kids are aware of stuff that mom and dad are like, oh, just go to your room and stop talking about it. This is why kids get freaked out, because they're having paranormal experiences. No adult is there to explain it to them. The closest they get is some horror movie or scary story, or somebody at church going, that's a demon, you get it, blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
so they're basically being taught to turn it off, to tune out, to shut down their abilities, because mom and dad aren't talking to the spirits in the house. Mom and dad aren't aware of the energy shift, so I must be not either. And if they try to talk about it to kids at school, they're going to get laughed at. The teacher's going to say, oh, stop with your imagination. This isn't story time. So they're going to get ridiculed, and they're just going to go, I'm not one of these people.
Mhm.
And it's just a good chunk of my client base too is people who are established in life. They've had a good job, or they've got a business that they've been rolling on. They've got a good home. They have a solid foundation. And what happens then? Their psychic and their paranormal abilities come back online. They're seeing things. They're talking to people. They're trying to get a good night's sleep, but there's spirits in the room saying, psst, hey, let's talk, let's talk. And they're like, what do I do? Am I losing my mind? Am I going crazy? I was told this is either the stuff of nutcases or this is the stuff of evil, but I don't think it's either. What do I do? So I help them to develop their abilities. I help them to communicate with the spirits in their house. I help them to resolve any sort of paranormal problems, which are 99% our own creation. We're making it up. We're not under demonic attack. I'm 52 years old. I've been dealing with paranormal stuff literally my entire life. I'm not kidding when I said when I say I'm born into a paranormal world. My mom's OBGYN is the basis for the Changeling movie, had seances in his house. Okay. I'm literally born into the paranormal. So I have been around the paranormal my entire life of 52 years. This isn't something I just started doing 10 years ago or whatever.
Mhm.
And in that entire time, I have never seen a demon. I've never seen the big, bad, awful nasties. I mean, I've heard about people having issues, and when we analyze it, we look at it, it's like, oh, no. I've had people have what they thought were demonic attack, and it was their own stuff that they own created. And so I help people to resolve that. I don't believe they're demons. And certainly possession, like you see in the movies, is nonsense. It doesn't work that way. So, no, it is a natural part of our world. Every single human being has paranormal abilities. Every single one of us has the ability to communicate with grandma and say, hey, I love you, and to hear back from grandma. Every single one of us has that ability. It's just been demonized over the years, and people tune it out, turn it off, but you can turn it back on and use it. Absolutely.
Great. Now, I mean, uh, I'm so overwhelmed right now because I just love you talking about that. It's one of my passion. Um, and to my understanding, you said you was born into it. Didn't you, if I remember correctly, back in 2018, I think you said something about you when we took you out for lunch one time, I think, for Pagan Pride. Um, you talked about living into a haunted house.
Mm-hmm.
Did you
The house I
ever?
grew up in was
Yeah,
haunted.
yeah. Did you ever? I mean, you probably have some kind of method of communicating with the dead. Do you use tools or what do you do?
My abilities, my strongest ability is claircognizance, meaning I've sort of got a telepathic connection. It's like a mediumship kind of thing, not trance mediumship or channeling, but it's a mediumship connection where it's like I kind of get a download, kind of get a communication with them. And that's the way it's always been with whispers and with the dead people. We
Hmm.
kind of have like a connection where we understand each other. And I can use a Ouija board, but it's slow and clunky. It's not very effective. But I teach it to people. I teach people to use a Ouija board because some people are really good at it. My wife is really good at it. We can do table tipping. I've always got a pendulum handy because I think one of the best ways to help people learn to tap into their paranormal abilities is starting with a pendulum, and then we can move on to like dowsing rods and automatic writing. Automatic writing is beautiful. It's a great way. So there are a lot of techniques that we can use, but for me, I my own mind and a black mirror. The black mirror is one of my favorite tools in
Mm.
seance.
Yes, yes. Very much so. I think we have a couple of comments here, Nico. If you want to read them, please. We have one from Mariah and one from Silver. You see that? Oh, I can read them. Yep, there you go. It's up on the.
Mariah says, my 4-year-old often talks to me about her 3 times great grandfather and how he died of tuberculosis, which is just wild, and I love it every time that she brings it up.
Absolutely. Kids know. Kids can tune in. Kids have that awareness. And it could even be a past life memory that they're bringing back. Absolutely. Trust kids because they haven't been taught to tune it out or to tune it off like most of us adults have. They're tuned in. They know.
Definitely.
And then Silver says, very enlightening rune discussion. Thank you, Kaedrich.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Awesome. So I'm start touching base on this. Like I said, I love this. If a spirit becomes an issue for you, how do you deal with this? Move on. I mean, spirit traps and release other places. How do you deal? Excuse me. How do you deal with the spirit?
How do you deal with a person that won't move on?
About the same thing, right?
They're people, and every one of us has a. For example, there was a lady who was a client dealing with a spirit that was causing some problems in her house, and she needed to have him dealt with. And working with her, all of my clients now are Zoom. Most of my clients aren't even in the US nowadays, but working through Zoom, I found I could actually explore her house. I could feel it out. And I'm like, I get this biker feeling. And she's like, yeah, the guy who lived here was like a 1%er. He was an outlaw biker, loud music. Neighbors hated him. They were grateful when he died. When I moved in, I'm like, well, he's still there. He hates what you've done to the place, because it was all nice and frilly, feminine kind of things there. And he was a rough and tumble kind of biker. And so we basically opened up a portal for him to help him cross over that went to a place, with fighting and drinking and loud music and motorcycles. And she's like, oh my God, that sounds like hell. And I'm like, yeah, for you it is. But for him, that's heaven. Right now, your house is hell for him. So we encouraged him to move on to a better place by opening that portal to his version of heaven. And we do that with different things. Sometimes it's a nature spirit causing havoc and we have to work with that. Sometimes most of the time, it's actually self-generated entities like thought forms, poltergeists, egregores. They cause problems. And I work with my clients shadow work. We get through some of the shadow work and I give them some spiritual working techniques. And it clears it up. It isn't like just sage or holy water and just poof gone. You can do that. It'll get rid of it temporarily, just like an attachment, a spirit attachment. You can do a clearing to clear off the spirit, but you got to get to the root cause. Why are they there in the first place? And that's where shadow work comes in. That's where spirit development comes in, so that we get to the root of the cause and clear that up so that it's not a problem going forward.
Yes, I'm very fond of a shadow work. We probably have just a couple more questions here. From Bob, he is asking, how can you tell the difference between something communicate to you by a spirit versus past life memories?
You have to develop your abilities, and then you'll be able to discern. I've got a few practices that I teach my students and clients that help them discern internally generated information versus communicated information versus something coming from past life or tapping into what some call the Akashic records. Sometimes that gets a little confusing in there because you can think of this 90% of the thoughts going through your head, 90% of your emotions are not originated by you unless you've been doing a lot of work to shield and tune yourself. They're not your own. They're received by the energies and the entities all around you. And you have to learn to discern that. And it comes through practice. It comes through techniques. It's one of the things that I keep teaching my students and clients how to do that.
Great, great. So, before we let you go, because I know you're on a tight schedule here, um, what's next for you? What's coming out? Any new books? Any kind of workshops, events are you doing?
Yep, I'm working on one that is an online course. My newest course is a 12-week starseed wound course. It's about healing the starseed wound. It is about what a lot of past life work, multiple parts of the course are getting into past life and between lives in order to find out where you come from, why you're here, what your karmic agreements and your karmic bonds are, and healing through that. And it's also going into tapping into what your mission is as a star seed, working on that one so that you can bring that into your life so that you don't have a spiritual and a work balance. You have life so that
Mhm.
you're living your purpose with everything you do. Like I said, that's about a 12-week course, and it's online stuff with where you get to watch videos and you audio meditations and some worksheets, and then there's also group discussion, Q&A, bonus trainings, that sort of thing. That's the newest project I'm working on, Heal the Starseed Wound, and you'll be able to find access to that on Facebook. If you were to go to my profile, there's a link to a Facebook group that I have, uh, Awakening Your Starseed Identity. So I've got that's on there. And people will go, but wait, what about the Norse stuff? This is the culmination of everything I've done my entire life: the paranormal, the hypnotherapy, the shadow work, the Norse stuff. This is the culmination. This is where everything I've worked on for my entire life has led up to this point in bringing this work out. So this is kind of like the start of my magnum opus.
Great, great. Well, I just I have one more question from my husband. I think you remember him from Pagan Pride
Yep,
2018. He has one question before you leave. He's over here just sitting quietly. So there you go.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, sir. Now,
Excellent.
my question is this. Your writing's going to last generations. It's going to make an impact. If you leave this world, what would you want this world to really learn from your writings?
You are the source of your own everything. You are the source of your own challenges, your own difficulties. You are the source of your own growth, your evolution. Yes, other people can mess with you and harm you and interfere with that. But what do you take away from that? I tell my shadow clients all the time, you may or not be responsible for what happened to you, but what you do with it is 100% your own responsibility. And so you are in charge of everything in your life, from your spiritual growth to your evolution to your shadows. And don't wait for an external moment. 2012 came and went. People expected a big ascension thing. People are expecting a big disclosure movement. People are expecting a big ascension practice to come and save everybody. There is no external salvation. You have to do your own work. And that's the reason why you're here, by the way, to do your own work. There is no escape. There is no easy way out of this. You are your own problem. You are your own solution, and you are your own cause for continued evolution. Stop externalizing it and take charge of your own might and main. Take charge of your own causality, your own fate, because that's why you're here.
Great, great. Well,
Thank you.
we hate to see you leave, but I know you're on a time schedule. We appreciate so much of you coming on and being our first guest. I hope we did okay.
It's great.
Great. We would like to have you on again, maybe next year sometime.
Sounds
Uh,
good.
so, because you are just such a person with so much knowledge in different aspects of many different things that I think we all love. And, I think speaking on behalf of Nico and I
Yep.
and the other two that's not here tonight and our viewers, it has been such a pleasure to have you with us. And thank you so much I know it was kind of like a fast notice and everything,
Good.
but, it's a blessing listening to you. I can listen to you all night. So I really can't.
True.
But I know you have to go. I just want to say we appreciate you. We love every bit of it and have many, many blessings.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
May you all wax and thrive well with all that you do.
Thank
Hail.
Hail. And thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this with us. It has been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome.
Yes. Thank you.
That's going to be on there.
Now, I just want to say to our viewers, thank you for watching us. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Spread the YouTube video, to everybody, and subscribe because, we love doing this. It's really exciting. We have a fabulous lineup with other guests coming soon. I would love to tell you, but then again, I like to surprise you too. So, but stay tuned. To I think our next schedule will be next Thursday at 8 p.m. with another author. So anyway, good night, everyone. Thank you so much for everything. Many blessings.
Hey,
The blessed be.
before you log off, say
Thank you guys once again. Without you guys, we really can't do this. And remember, stay blessed, less stressed.
Yes, stay blessed.
Make sure you tell them to subscribe and like
And
it.
subscribe. Coming from my husband. Subscribe. Okay. Blessed be everybody. Have a great night.